So with special right triangles, you've got 45, 45, 90s, and 30, 60, 90s. There's this relationship. You have to pretty much just memorize the look of the triangle. So for 45, 45, 90s, the two sides are the same and the hypotenuse has a square root of 2. X times square root of 2. For 30, 60, 90s, the short side is x. The hypotenuse is 2x, so just times 2. And then the long side across from the 60 is times square root of 3. So you have to look at the triangle that they give you, decide which one it fits, and then determine the two other sides. So for this first example, it's a 45, 45, 90. You just look at the triangles. So we know that these two sides will be the same. The only difference is the hypotenuse gets a square root of 2 and the legs do not. So just write a proportion. Hypotenuse gets a square root of 2 and the legs do not. So if we're going to solve for a leg, you would say x over 10. So that's like leg over hypotenuse, side over hypotenuse. And for the 45, 45, 90, the hypotenuse gets a square root of 2. The legs do not. So it's just 1 over square root of 2. So you have the legs are 1. The hypotenuse just gets a square root of 2. It's the only one that gets it. So if you do leg over hypotenuse, you do leg over hypotenuse. Then you cross multiply. X times square root of 2 equals 10. So to solve this, you have to you have to divide the square root of 2. And then your algebra skills have to come back a little bit. When you're dividing by a square root, you just do the same square root on top and bottom, and it's like multiplication. So that's 10 square root of 2 over square root of 2, and square root of 2 is just regular 2. It's the pair. Now, one trick, you can kind of simplify this when you're dividing by a square root of 2. You can remember that basically you're just dividing by 2. So if it's 10 divided by square root of 2, you're dividing by 2, so you get 5. Then you just have to remember to put the square root of 2 on the answer. So 10 divided by square root of 2, you're dividing by 2 to get 5, but then you put a square root of 2 on it. So we just solved for this side. We got 5 square root of 2. And you need to remember that the two sides are always the same. So it doesn't matter which side you take. They're both the same thing. 5 squared root of 2, 5 squared root of 2. Same idea here. We've got the short side. This is a 30, 60, 90. So if you look back, you have the short side gets x, or just a 1. The long side gets the square root of 3. And the hypotenuse gets a 2. So when you're taking your sides, you just take these ratios. Short side's 1, long side square root of 3, hypotenuse is just 2. So this is the short side, this is the long side, and this is the hypotenuse. So when you're taking your ratio, you've got the short side over whichever one we want to solve for. Let's take the long side here. And on that last slide, we wrote that the short side gets a 1, the long side gets a square root of 3. and you have to cross multiply. So solve it out. Square root of 3 times 5 square root of 3 and L times 1. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just 3 times 5 is 15. So this side is 15. The hypotenuse, we've got the ratio is 1, 2, and this side gets the square root of 3. So short side is 5 square root of 3 over the hypotenuse, we don't know. That's equal to the ratio. The short side gets a 1, the long side gets a 2, or the hypotenuse gets a 2. Then you cross multiply. So h times 1 is h equals 2 times 5 square root of 3 oh, there's another side here to solve. Nope, got it all. So same idea over here. It's a 30, 60, 90. So the hypotenuse gets a 2, short side gets a 1, the long side gets a square root of 3. You just have to write your proportions. We don't know these two sides, so we're going to write the proportion however we want. We can go x over 4 square root of 3 equals 1 over 2, and then cross multiply. 2x equals 4 square root of 3. So x equals, divide by 2, you get 2 square root of 3. When you set up to find y over 4 square root of 3, y goes with the square root of 3 side, and the hypotenuse goes with the 2 side. So when you cross multiply, you get 2y equals square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just 3 times the 4 is 12. So we have 6 and 2 square root of 3. Forty-five, 45, 90, these two sides get the same, and this is times the square root of 2. So this side is also 2 square root of 6 because they're the same thing. And then to get the other side, it has to be times the square root of 2. So we're going to do, set up our proportion, 2 square root of 6 over x equals 1 over square root of 2. And then cross multiply. 2 square root of 6 times square root of 2. You can multiply the square roots together and you get 2 square root of 12. That can actually be simplified. Break it down to 4 times 3. Pair of 2's gets to come out with a leftover 3. The leftover 3 stays in the square root. This pair of 2's comes out. 2 times 2 is 4 on the outside. So the hypotenuse is 4 square root of 3. Write your ratios, 1, 1, square root of 2. Fill it in with the triangle, and then just write your proportions. You have 10 goes with the square root of 2. You could write it this way, where you just take the 10 with square root of 2. And then the side we're trying to find with the 1. You can set it up either way, where you take the side with itself, or you could go like leg over hypotenuse, leg over hypotenuse. You cross multiply this. So 10 times 1 equals x times square root of 2. You're going to divide by square root of 2. When you're dividing by a square root, just divide by the regular number first. Shortcut I talked about a little while ago. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. But then since it was square root, there's a square root in the answer. And since they're both 45 degrees, the two sides are the same. They're both 5 squared root of 2. So for this problem, since there's a couple triangles, just focus on one first. We're going to focus on the 30, 60, 90 triangle first because it's the only one that has a number for a side length. Fill in the ratio 1, 2, square root of 3. So you set up your proportion a over 1 equals 10 over 2. Cross multiply 2a equals 10, a equals 5. Set up another proportion to find the b side. So we can do b over square root of 3 equals 10 over 2. So that's 10 over 2 is 5. If we just want to keep that as a 5 times the square root of 3. It's 5 square root of 3. And to find c, since we have a different triangle over here, the two angles are both 45, so that means the two sides are the same. So this is also 5 square root of 3. And your relationship for 45, 45, 90s is these are each 1, and the hypotenuse is square root of 2. So you set up your ratio, your proportion, 5 square root of 3 over 1 equals d over square root of 2. Cross multiplying, you get d equals 5 times, multiply your square roots together, 3 times 2 is 6. Now you've got all the sides.